This is the preparation, the first prep for Lecture 21. We're entering a new whole section. We're going to talk about bacterial genetics, a little bit about viruses, but it's mostly any place where I mention viruses will be using viruses to still map bacterial genes. And I may actually cut the virus part out depending on how timing goes. So we'll be spending a couple of 2 to 3 lectures talking about sort of mapping of genes in bacteria. It's very similar to eukaryotes, except that the way we collect the data is things are a bit different. We have to be careful in selection and so on. We can't look at bacteria and see most phenotypes, so we have to do, replica plating and those sorts of techniques to figure out what their genotypes are. But the mapping really is just counting the crossovers and dividing by a total. So the concept is very similar. And then the next part that we launch into will be gene regulation in bacteria, and we will be looking at operon regulation in particular. And that will take us in a couple of weeks. So it'll take us a couple of weeks to cover these various topics, and we'll be past the next midterm by then. Okay, so that's my not very brief introduction. So the bacteria and viruses have very simple genomes compared to eukaryotes. They're metabolically quite diverse, but they're quite simple in things like just using certain sugars, for example. And the kinds of genes that we look at are things like resistance to antibiotics and the ability to make nutrients. We've been talking just yesterday in lecture about sort of fungal genetics and plating them to figure out what nutrients they are not able to make themselves. And we sort of do, excuse me, similar things with bacteria. Eukaryotes don't undergo meiosis. They are haploid for the most part, but they can still undergo exchange of genetic information. So there is still kind of mating, and so the types of genetic exchange is conjugation, and this is a form of sexual reproduction, but it's a sort of a one-way transfer of DNA between bacteria, and there's 2 different ways we're going to look at it. One is through the transfer of plasmids, and one is partial transfer of bacterial chromosome. And we'll go through the details of what that actually means. There's also a process of transformation. It turns out that bacteria can actually just pick up pieces of DNA from the surrounding environment. One of the reasons why bacterial genomes can be complex in terms of species is that they can pick up DNA from any organism if it's lying around in the soil or wherever it is they're living. And so if you look at certain plasmids that some bacteria carry, those are little circles of DNA that they've picked up. Sometimes there's genes from like 10 different species on those plasmids that they've just kind of picked up over generations. So it's kind of interesting, and it's really important for things like antibiotic resistance. If I have time, I'll just tell you a little bit about that at the end of this whole section. And then transduction. Viruses infect bacteria, and they basically infect the bacteria, put their own DNA into the bacteria, and then turn the bacterium into a little factory to just make more and more viruses. But sometimes there are mistakes that occur, and the viruses that are produced don't contain the viral DNA, but they have accidentally picked up the remnants of some bacterial DNA. And if that virus goes and infects a bacterium, now what it's doing is it's bringing another bacteria's DNA and introducing it into the new bacterium that it's infecting. I've got images and stuff. So basically a kind of mating, the ability to just pick up DNA from the environment and then transfer via another organism that kind of picks up DNA from one strain and moves it to another through a largely accidental process. But it happens so at such a large scale that you can detect those errors and make use of them in gene mapping. And so here's a picture of those things. So in conjugation, bacteria actually, there's two different types of bacteria, the type that are called donors and the kind that are called recipients. And the donors form this structure called a pilus, and it's kind of like a tube, a long skinny tube, and DNA can be transferred from the donor to the recipient. And that's referred to as conjugation. There is partial uptake of DNA just from the environment surrounding. There is sometimes a partial transfer of the actual bacterial chromosome. That happens under special circumstances, and we will be talking about that a bit later, where some of the bacterial chromosome actually gets transferred into a recipient. And then this is the example where this is oversimplified because the viruses basically infect the bacterium, and then the bacterial machinery starts making lots and lots of copies of the viral DNA and all the little components to build a new batch of viruses. And the cell eventually bursts open and just sprays tons of viruses in all directions, some of which may have not just viral DNA, but some bacterial DNA as well. And then if they go and infect another bacterium, now here's some DNA from another bacteria that can be introduced and then incorporated into the chromosome of the bacterium by crossing over. In all cases, in most cases, not all cases, the DNA that's incorporated in, if it's got some similarity to the DNA in the bacterial chromosome, crossing over can incorporate it in and replace actually some of the bacterial chromosome with the new DNA that's introduced. Same with transformation here. Plasmids are different. They are little circles of DNA that replicate on their own and can maintain independence from the bacterial chromosome. Okay, so this is an overview, and it took a bit of time, but it's important to kind of have some sense of the processes that take place in these organisms. So working with bacteria and their viruses is really fast. You know, if you put some bacteria in liquid culture, you can end up with billions of them in a very short time, a day or two. And so you can work on a really high scale. So things like the rates of mutation, for example, or the frequency of certain kinds of replication errors happening that introduce mutations and things like that. They're really very infrequent. So this is, let's see, this is 1 every billion. You know, if you've got a 1 in a billion event, you couldn't possibly study that in mice because, you know, how are you going to possibly get a billion mice? And then maybe you'll miss that one event. But if you had 100 billion cells, there's a good chance you're going to be able to detect this, right? And so the idea is you can study things that happen very rarely in these organisms because you also have the ability, it's not like you have to go through, you know, 100 billion cells. You can use special selection techniques so that only the kinds of things you're looking for can be obtained. Basically, a selective mechanism will select for everything that you don't want to die, and only the particular genotype that you're trying to isolate will survive. So these are different kinds of selection techniques. And so minimal media is just like we talked about with fungi, and it's water and salt, and there's it's usually either a liquid broth or a solid medium with agar on a plate. And it has a carbon source, so some kind of sugar, and just your basic minimum. That's for organisms that are completely wild type and can produce all their own nutrients, their own vitamins, their own nucleotides and amino acids and all that sort of thing. Supplemented are minimal media plus a nutrient of some kind, 1 or more of those, or antibiotics, which we also use for selection. Okay, and so we can grow these bacteria in liquid culture, And sometimes they're in very big culture, not a small culture like this. Um, and then you can take aliquots of those and plate them, spread them on a petri plate with that has agar and the nutrients and so on. And we use these that you can buy lots of different kinds. So the kind we used to use were glass ones. You heat them up and dip them in alcohol, make sure that there's no other bacteria on them, and then you squirt a little bit of a small amount of the bacteria on here. And when this is cooled enough, you use this to spread them all out so that the liquid is distributed across the whole plate. And then um, you have to know a little bit about how many cells are there, and you want to put it not too thick and not too thin. The idea is to have a certain, maybe a few hundred colonies on a plate. And you cannot see any single cells, but hopefully this is the kind of thing you've got, a plate with, a bunch of single cells well spread so that the colonies won't touch each other. And then literally 37 degrees for 8 to 10 hours is usually sufficient to get growth of colonies. And each colony came from a single cell. So all the cells in that colony should be the same genotype. So that's technically a clone. But each colony now has billions of cells in it. So you can, the cell division of bacteria is something like 1 every half hour, right? So in a day, in 24 hours, you've got billions and billions of cells in that colony. And then in the colony, of course, we have enough cells that we can actually do something. We can plate subsets of them on different media to see what their genotypes are and things like that. Okay, so terms and concepts, you should know these from previous lecture, but prototrophs can grow on minimal medium. They can produce whatever they need themselves. Auxotrophs are going to require some kind of supplement. Bacteria have a single chromosome, which is a circular chromosome. So if you look inside a bacterial cell, usually it's kind of glued to the end of one end of the cell, but it is a circular chromosome. But there's often, not always, but many types of bacteria have extra elements too called plasmids. And these are little tiny circles of DNA. They're much smaller than the chromosome. They often may have only 20 or 30 genes on them. And they can be transferred from bacterium to bacterium. And some of them are even capable of inserting themselves as part of, I should change color here, as part of the bacterial chromosome. And so, and if they do that, then that causes a really interesting phenomenon that we're going to talk about later. And both the bacterial chromosome and the plasmids are circular. There are a few linear plasmids. We aren't going to talk about any of those. But you might want to think about what this means if we're studying crossing over, because if you've got a plasmid that's a circle and a bacterial chromosome that's a circle, you can make one large circle with just a single crossover between them. But if you have a bacterial chromosome and there's some DNA that's been taken up from the environment, a single crossover is going to make you a linear chromosome, which is then going to be eaten up by nucleases that live inside the cell, because it'll be seen as an invading virus or something like that. So you always have to have even numbers of crossovers when you're introducing linear DNA into a circular chromosome. And we'll be talking about that towards the end of this section when we talk about the mapping of bacterial genes. Okay, so we can use special selection systems, and the idea is if we're looking for a certain kind of mutation, if we design our experiment well, we can use selection to reduce the number of colonies we have to look at to find the ones of the genotype we're interested in. And the commonest one is antibiotic resistance. So if you have bacteria that are sensitive to a particular antibiotic, and we plate them all over a plate that has the antibiotic, they're all going to die. But if we've done an experiment and we're trying to find cells that have taken in a plasmid that has antibiotic resistance or something like that, or some DNA we've provided, or we've done a conjugation experiment, then the only cells that will grow on the plate are the ones that have gained that resistance, right? So that's a way of selecting for ones that are antibiotic resistant. And the way we denote that genotype would be that if tetracycline was the antibiotic, it would be a little superscripted R. And the ones that are not resistant would be called sensitive. So sensitive versus resistant. Sensitive ones will die on the plate with the antibiotic, and the resistant ones will live. And then metabolic requirements. So we can produce minimal media with supplemented nutrients. And if we're trying to isolate cells that can produce their own of these amino acids or vitamins or whatever they are, then we plate them on a culture that doesn't have those nutrients, so that only the ones that can make their own can survive. And then carbon sources. We'll be talking just a little bit about that. But if we're looking for individuals that, for example, can utilize lactose as a sugar source, then we only provide the cells on the plate with lactose, and then only the cells that can break it down and use it to produce energy will be able to survive. And this is just an example of some of the commonest of the selectable markers. So this one is biotin. So biotin is one of the B vitamins. And if the cells are biotin minus, then they will only grow if you provide biotin as a supplement. Cells that can make their own biotin can grow on a plate that has biotin added or not, because they make their own. It doesn't matter to them what you put on the plate. But these ones can only survive if you provide it to them. Same with these two. These are amino acid ones, arginine and methionine. If you're Arg minus or Met minus, you can't make your own, so you have to have it supplemented in the media. Lactose and galactose are two kinds of sugars that are used as carbon source. And so if we make plates like this plate, and we don't provide them with glucose, which is or sucrose, but glucose is the one we normally use. But if we don't provide them with glucose and we do provide them with lactose, then only the cells that are lac plus, only cells that are lac plus can grow, right? If you're lac minus, then you're not going to be able to grow on a cell or a plate that has lactose. So these ones are important because it's kind of the opposite of this one. So this one can't make its own vitamins, and so it's biotin minus. And if you add the biotin to the plate, now it can grow. Whereas the lac minus cells can't grow when the unless the lactose is added, right? So it's kind of the other way, or the lac minus cannot grow when you've got the lactose added. So it's kind of the opposite of the biotin and the amino acid ones. They have to be lac plus or gal plus in order to use those sugars for their survival. And then antibiotic streptomycin. If you're sensitive, you're going to die on a plate that has streptomycin, but you can grow if there isn't any strep on the plate. And if you're resistant to the antibiotic streptomycin, it doesn't matter if there's any strep on the plate or not, you'll grow because you can resist it if it's there, and if it's not there, it's not a problem, right? Okay, so that took a little longer than I expected. I hope it was clear and thorough explanation. I will post this one, and I will do a second one in a moment.